Daddy, why'd they build all those pyramids? May 3, 2189 AD, Day 3, Chapter 91. Precisely at noon, Ad gave the order to advance. He had lost half of his 250,000 troops the day before, but still had 125,000 able-bodied soldiers to attack Charlemagne's less than 20,000. The snow was still a foot deep, but the ground under it had softened. The ground of the Jezreel Valley was a mix of clay and black dirt, good for farming, but not so good for fighting. Ad's troops plowed ahead, but began to tire as they reached Charlemagne's lines. The two army corps engaged, and for a while Ad seemed to be gaining the upper hand, but Dwight threw in Joan of Arc's all-female reserve division, and thereafter neither Ad nor Charlemagne could gain the upper hand. At 1 p.m., Napoleon's cannons, all 1,000 of them, opened fire on the center of King David's Second Corps. Everyone took cover as best they could and waited out the laser storm. The handheld shields deflected most of the rays, but as the hour-long cannonade wound down, David estimated at least 1/4 of his 20,000 soldiers were injured. Gabe now ordered Dwight, commanding the reserve 4th Corps, to send in another of his reserve divisions. It was ordered to advance to the very front of David's 2nd Corps. Gabe now realized Bell's intentions and determined to counter them. As the reserve unit of 5,000 soldiers arrived at the front of the line, David asked the troops filing through his ranks who was commanding them. "General Robert E. Lee of Virginia, sir," was the reply. Just as Lee's troops got into line, Napoleon's cannon ceased fire and a massive line of 250,000 troops began marching across the wet, snowy ground toward King David's troops 5 miles to their south. The ground was still wet and sticky, but Napoleon's troops continued their steady march. What should have taken an hour took more like an hour and a half. Leading Napoleon's troops were the troops of Pontius Pilate division, transferred over from Caesar's 2nd Corps at General Pilate's request. Pilate's elite Roman troops slammed into Lee's, and the vicious fighting broke out such as never was witnessed before in the history of the world. After a half-hour's advance and retreat, the fighting eased, allowing casualties to be pulled away as best could be done by the medics. Over on the Evil Inc. left flank, Ad, now finding his second wind and some much-needed assistance from Stalin, began to push Charlemagne up the east end of the Megiddo Hill. Gabe finally ordered Dwight to send in Saladin's reserve division, and the added force slowed Adolph's boys to a crawl. At 4 p.m., with only a couple hours of daylight remaining, Bell swung Caesar's 2nd Corps in behind Knapp, and this added strength began to push Lee and David back up the hill. The fighting was hand-to-hand and desperate. Gabe had only 2 reserve divisions left in Dwight's 4th Corps, but once he saw Bell's drawing men from Caesar's 2nd Corps into the central assault, he sent Erwin Rommel's division of Dwight's 4th Corps around Goodcorp's far left flank, and with lightning speed, the Desert Fox's men began to chew up Caesar's right flank. Gabe's main left flank under Grant's 1st Corps, adjacent to Rommel, swung forward like a door to maintain the continuity, with Rommel on the very far left and David on Grant's right. The massive casualties in Bell's center and right soon forced him to bring up more reserves until they were all engaged. Mussolini aided Caesar against Rommel on Bell's right flank, while Darius and Hannibal advanced in the center to replace the massive losses Napoleon was sustaining. His men were on open ground and assaulting up Megiddo Hill in the snow and mud. By 5 p.m., the entire line of battle had swung 90 degrees. Bell's troops were attacking essentially from the east, and Gabe's troops were defending from the west. Ad's troops were only a few hundred yards from Megiddo headquarters by 5:30, while Rommel at the other end of the battle line was still a mile from Nazareth. The line began to waver back and forth like a giant teeter-totter. There was now only 1 division in either army not engaged, Dwight's final reserve brigade, commanded by the son of Nun. Dwight, seeing that Ad was getting dangerously close to Megiddo headquarters, ordered Joshua's Jericho boys to his far right flank, and these well-rested troops began to pound away at Ad's right flank. The end of the teeter-totter begrudgingly began to give way, and as the sun reached the horizon at 6 p.m., the entire Evil Ink line began to crumble. Within 15 minutes, the rout was on. As complete darkness fell over the Jezreel Valley, the entire force of Evil Ink had surrendered and was being led south to the West African plain. As they marched along, an Evil Ink prisoner being guarded by a good Corps soldier with his laser staff said, "Napoleon, the greatest general ever, just couldn't get the job done." The guard replied, "Even Pickett couldn't have done it."